Expert Perspectives series, where we showcase insights from leading experts in complex product, systems, and software development. Covering industries from medical devices to aerospace and defense, we feature thought leaders who are shaping the future in their fields. I'm Kenzie, your host, and today I'm excited to welcome Richard Mott. Formerly educated in mechanical, electrical, and software engineering and mathematics, Richard has more than 30 years of experience in product development and product remediation. Richard has worked with everyone from Honeywell to Pfizer and is now a renowned risk management consultant. Today, Richard will be speaking with us about his patent-pending method to assess benefit risk more objectively in healthcare. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Richard Mott.
Hello, my name is Richard Mott, and I'm delighted to be speaking with you about a general solution to the problem of assessing whether the benefit of a medical action will outweigh its risk. I'll start my presentation by saying a few words about my background and how this background led to the benefit risk method you'll be seeing in the presentation. To understand my background, it really helps to go back to the first job I got out of undergraduate school. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering and an emphasis in fluid flow. And my first job was in the aerospace industry at Arnold Engineering Development Center at a wind tunnel that Baron von Braun designed. I worked there as a project manager, coordinating various departments with the needs of the clients who brought models to be tested. These are pictures of the ADC's transonic wind tunnel with its 20-foot by 40-foot long test section that consumes over 250,000 horsepower when running flat out. Those dots in the walls are holes, and a slight suction would pull on the outside of the wall to suck the air's boundary layer through the holes so the flight vehicle appeared more closely to match its flight characteristics in free air. It was an amazing place to work. We could talk about aerodynamic issues and thermodynamic issues, like why nitrogen condenses out of the air at Mach speeds above 6, or why every jet fighter in every country's Air Force has a maximum speed of about Mach 3.5. But to stay on the topic of benefit risk, the reason, or my intro to this, the reason I brought this up was that I saw here firsthand the long looping iterations that came from different technical specialties, each approaching the same problem from the perspective of their technical specialty. I found it very frustrating, and the following analogy very apt. After getting, so each of our technical specialties would look at the same problem, the elephant, from their own view. And I found myself getting frustrated with my electrical and software engineering coworkers that they didn't understand what I was talking about, but I realized soon I didn't understand what they were talking about either. So I decided I wanted to become part of the solution to that problem by going back to graduate school and getting myself rounded out in my education so I could talk to these folks from their perspective also. So I went back to after mechanical and undergraduate, went back to graduate school in electrical and mathematics, and picked up enough software. I started teaching programming also in college. I developed there a solution for the robot arms in those wind tunnels to control a robot arm for every possible 1, 2, or 3 rotational degree of freedom arm, and that was my graduate thesis. After I completed my thesis, I felt empowered to start my work going wherever I wanted, doing whatever I wanted to do, and realized that if I wanted to do anything significant, it would take many years, and I decided to focus on teamwork. That sounded pretty good. My ability to work across technical boundaries enabled me to bring exceptionally novel products to the market. For instance, I brought an Internet of Things device to the market during the 1990s, before Internet of Things was a thing. And I rapidly advanced while I was working as the VP of engineering at a boutique design firm in the Silicon Valley. These are a few of the clients that I had through the work that I've done over the years. And the combination of the breadth of my formal training and my system perspective for solving problems has really helped me continue to work across boundaries, so that I've worked for companies to help them establish product requirements, trace requirements, do V&V work. I've done a lot of post-market surveillance work. I established internal audit programs. I've been the lead auditee when my firm is audited. Had significant success accelerating product development, and has been work on CAPAs. So mixed in with all of these works, I started specializing into risk management as a consulting focus versus something I just did normally during development. And since the defense of a patent requires notice, I'll mention that the material here is being pursued on a patent, and would like to talk with anyone who finds this interesting to pursue after you've learned about it. So let me start my presentation on benefit risk analysis by talking about how important it is to all branches of medicine and the many problems we have implementing it. The solution I'm going to come up with, I'll just outline here briefly so you can follow as we're going through the presentation. I'm going to first establish a single and much more objective metric to measure benefit and risk than people traditionally use. I'll be accumulating overall benefit and risk with sets of metric values from this first metric. And finally, we'll show how to draw a conclusion from the overall benefits and risk measurements of which is bigger, benefit or risk. So in terms of importance, historically, benefit risk has been with medicine for millennia. It's a basic tenet to all of medicine. The first do no harm goes all the way back to the Code of Hammurabi, 2000 BC. And it legally required physicians to think not just about how they can help patients with treatment, but what harm they might cause the treatment, and making sure that the balance of those two favor the patient. It's very much the benefit-risk balance that we look at today. The result we're going to talk about is going to be used everywhere throughout medicine, with devices, with drugs, with biologics, even with clinical trials. So it's that fundamental across medicine. How it's used currently, if you are in one of the ways developing new products, benefit risk determinations have to be used in clinical trials to show that they're ethical to perform, that we're not putting people in danger needlessly. Benefit risk determinations are the final gate before a new product is released for use to patients. And I have a quote here from a paper put out by AstraZeneca saying the benefit risk determination is the apex deliverable of any R&D organization. There's a lot of truth to that. It's the final thing that's being put together to justify a product's release. And so it has a very important role here for FDA. It has a very important role for pretty much the regulatory structure of every country, including the EU. In terms of creating a quality system, every medical company is required to have one. Benefit risk determinations are used to assess a company's quality system. This is per the FDA notice about factors on benefit risk analyses. When regulators are evaluating a company's quality system, they'll use benefit risk to determine if nothing should be done, if a product should be redesigned, if they should take legal actions against a company of a range of possibilities, from replacing things in the field to stopping products from being shipped. It's also a key and favorite target for product liability lawsuits because of how subjective it is, and we'll get to that in a moment. It can also be used for legal actions against officers. So benefit risk is a really foundational concept for getting products out and keeping products out and keeping companies running well. Just a bit of historical perspective on medical documentation and development. We have here, I've cited 4 different revisions of the laws regarding medical devices in the United States. This is a small sampling. The point I'm trying to make here is that each of these summaries of the laws discuss continually evolving, continually growing, more rigorous standards for evidence, more detailed requests for information from the regulators to the instrumentation development companies, to the product development companies. So first, medical products are heavily regulated. We have the trend of increasing analysis and rigor. Per ISO 1424971, and this is an application standard that is highly respected in the medical device field, a decision as to whether risks are outweighed by benefits is essentially a matter of judgment by experienced and knowledgeable individuals. And this is our current state of the art. Not that everybody does it this way, but this is the most common method of performing benefit risk analysis. And benefit risk analysis by this method has a lot of problems because it's based on the judgment and it's based on individuals, and both of those can change with different settings. That's why it's a favorite point of attack for product liability lawsuits. This quote was true in 1976 when medical devices were put under FDA regulation, but significantly it remains unchanged nearly 50 years later. benefit risk determinations are an aberration in that, unlike the rest of medicine, they have not improved over time. They've remained a judgment by a group of individuals. In 2018, FDA was approached by Congress to set a goal for itself of increasing the clarity, transparency, and consistency of benefit risk assessments from the FDA. This was in human drug review as the subject, and the issue was that various drug companies had gotten very frustrated with the FDA for disagreeing with their assessments of what benefit risks should look like. And to repeat again, when you have a group of individuals making a judgment, that's going to lead to inconsistencies because both the group and their own individual judgment will vary from one situation to the next. I have another quote here from the article from AstraZeneca. The field of formal and structured benefit risk assessments is relatively new. Over the last 20 years, there's still a lack of consistent operating detail in terms of best practice by sponsors and health authorities. So this is an understatement, but a true statement. We have had a lot of increasing effort over the last few years because if people are dissatisfied with the state of benefit risk assessments, they want to do better than this judgment approach. And so there have been a plethora of new methods developed. I've found one survey here that summarized 50 different methods, just to give you an idea of how many attempts there are. And I went through those 50 methods. The other thing that's interesting to see is the FDA's attempt to clarify benefit risk assessments. I have here 5 guidance documents from the FDA, and I would put forth the proposition that anytime you need 5 attempts to explain something, it means you didn't understand the thing well in the first place and are flailing about a bit trying to get it done right. I think this is also held up by the drug companies, pressure on Congress to get FDA to improve their clarity and consistency of benefit risk assessments. So here's the 50 methods that I found in one study of benefit risk assessments. They have them grouped into framework, metrics, estimate techniques, and utility surveys. These are the 50 different methods, and I've gone through each one of them, and they all have fundamental problems. I'm going through them a bit slowly, like here's one from the FDA, they have their benefit risk assessment. Health-adjusted life years is one of the few that uses the same metric for benefit and risk. Number needed to treat is a very popular indication for a single characteristic, but you can't integrate that across the many factors that are needed to do benefit risk assessment. And so we've gone down the rest of these methods. If I group these 50 methods by how they accumulate risk, I get a rather useful collection. Most of the methods do not consider all the risk benefit factors for a benefit risk situation. They will pick on just one factor, and you can't combine the factors with themselves or with others. It's simply looking at one factor by itself. So it's an extremely narrow view of benefit risk for most of these. The few methods that do look at all the risk benefit factors, most of them start with what I call the judgment method, where you're forced to distill all the factors down to the most significant few, only maybe 4 to 7 methods, 4 to 7 factors. So either the methods consider only one type of one factor at a time, or they force you to throw away most of the methods and consider maybe 4 or 7 factors. Is the second method. The third method is they assign numbers to the factors, and they'll add the factors together, and they'll divide the benefit sum by the risk sum. And if the division is bigger than 1, they'll say the benefit's bigger than the risk. And if the division is less than 1, they'll say the risk is bigger than the benefit. This is nice in that it considers as many factors as you want. But again, TR 24971, our well-respected standard for medical devices, says the following, that this is a challenging task to evaluate the overall residual risk, and you cannot do it by adding numbers individually. They're just a flat statement. You can't get there from here. And I created this. This is a table from 24971 that's commonly used, will be familiar to lots of people, of severity levels. I made a kind of rickety scale on the left here, where I've assigned numbers, which is most people do. They'll assign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the 5 categories. And the reason they say here that you can't achieve an overall evaluation of residual risk by adding numbers is when you assign numbers like this, you're creating a linear association that doesn't exist. If you were to assign numbers like this, then 3 minor injuries, when you sum them up, would be 6. And that'd be more important than 1 catastrophic injury that caused death. And I think everybody would agree that that's not what we want to have happen. We don't want to have 3 minor injuries count more than a death. But that's what happens inevitably when you add up individual risk numbers that have been assigned in this sort of a manner. So the issue is, how do we accumulate benefit or risk? So far, the answer has been to either look at very few factors or only 1 factor, or assign numbers, which we know won't work for the reason that I've described up here. So the alternative is what? The alternative is I'm going to propose a set theory. And for those that have done Venn diagrams, this may seem like it's so simple that it's not powerful enough for a task like this, but it is. We're going to use each element of the set to represent a single metric measurement of a benefit or a risk. And we're going to overestimate overall risk by simply adding elements to the set, not adding them numerically, but putting more elements in the set. We're not going to add numbers. So this gets us around the problem of adding numbers that 24971 preaches against. This puts no limit on the number of factors we have. We're not assigning numbers to risk, and we can put as many factors into this as are important to describe the situation. So returning again to what I said before, our outline for determining benefit risk is going to be establish a single, significantly more objective metric that measures benefit and risk. We're going to accumulate benefit and risk with sets of metric values of benefit and risk. And then we're going to show how to simplify all the overall levels of benefit and risk so that we can see either where the benefit's bigger or risk is bigger. So going on again, I'm going to pull up my blind man and elephant analogy again, because the perceived problem was, again, from people looking at the same problem in different perspectives, none of them wrong. All of them right, but none of them complete. Benefit and risk, a lot of people say, cannot be compared objectively. Most people look at them as being completely unrelated to each other, and that comparing them is an intractable problem, I've been told. And we're going to show that's not true, but this is the perception that we have to deal with and have to get past to be able to have a solution to the benefit risk problem. So we want to establish a single metric for benefit risk. We want it to be much more objective. When we look at measuring risk, we have lots of standards that do this. I have a very small selection here: 6812 failure mode analysis, 1025 fault tree analysis. I found a risk predictions for surgery out of Britain that was really well done. And there's many others I can put in here also. So we have lots of ways of measuring risk. I'll mention ISO 14971. I've talked about 24971, which is an application guide for 14971. 14971 has become the de facto risk management standard for medical devices. And I'm going to talk about this standard because of familiarity. It's not something we have to use, but it'll be something that I can talk with that people will be familiar with, and I hope will make it easy to follow what I'm going to describe. But we shouldn't feel like we're bound to following this standard either. So risk for ISO IEC guide 63 is defined as a combination of severity and probability. They don't say how they're combined, but it's both of those 2 factors considered together. The following tables are examples of metrics from 24971. This is the severity table that I showed you before, and this is a probability table. So we are following the definition of risk as a combination of severity and probability. And we're going to use these 2 tables for probability and severity measurements of a risk.